Leader. I represent the local highway authority who has viewed extensively all the sites that are before you today.
Morning, Gareth Johns, Provision on behalf of various clients.
Morning, sir. Mike Bodkin, Town, on behalf of Pinson's Lane.
Good morning, sir. I'm Giuseppe Zanre from Donington New Homes, the developer for Sandford Park West.
Good morning, Rob White from White Peak Planning, representing Bloor Homes. Sorry.
No problem, Rob. Morning, sir. Tim Burden, Planning Director at Turley, on behalf of Donington New Homes.
Good morning, Rebecca Fentrip on behalf of Bloor Homes.
Okay, welcome all, and thank you for that. So unless there's any procedural queries, I'm going to just start with the council. I was going to start with some questions about the planning permission that has been granted and progress with that, etc. And I understand that the council had maybe preempted that and had prepared an addendum to its written statement this morning. I don't know whether that's been circulated. No, I think it's, well, let me just, right, I don't know how we'll deal with it, but I don't think there's anything. Yeah, you've got some copies available. We may as well.
We've got some hard copies. Yeah. The note was, obviously the examination was going to be updated by Mrs. Willett, but we thought it'd be helpful to have it in writing as well, just so that she can talk to those points.
Yeah, I think that's probably right. Just to set the context, obviously policy SP16 deals with a site allocation that's been carried forward from an existing adopted plans. It relates to 134 hectares of land on the southern edge of Newbury and proposes around 1,500 dwellings, along with associated social and physical infrastructure, and sets out various requirements, including for affordable homes and housing mix, etc. I'm aware that the eastern part of the site, Sandford Park East, is outline planning permission, and that was granted on appeal, I understand, to Bloor Homes, and the western part, Sandford Park West, is being promoted by Donington New Homes. So I was aware of that, and in the examination library, exam document 19, is the appeal decision dated the 6th of May 2022, which I think some of you have referred to in your written statements, and I've had a look at. And I'm aware of what that does. And so I'll let the council just give us a brief update on that. And just if you could maybe just explain that what it obviously deals with a particular part of this allocation, but I think some of the planning conditions and planning obligations have implications for the Sandford Park West as well. So maybe if you could just cover that not in any detail, but just in sort of in the principle. And I'm going to talk about a few issues that may or may not be partly resolved by that planning permission and subsequent events anyway, some of which have been raised by parties on this side of the room. We will then, so that's what I'm going to be talking about, policy. And then the other item on the agenda, obviously, is the main item is on viability and deliverability and the timing of the development, which I know some people have got some queries about in terms of that. So I'll hand over to the council now, let you, just give us a brief update on where we are with the permission and how it relates to the whole allocation, if we could, please. Thank you.
Good morning, sir. I will address those points if you don't mind. So first of all, the allowed appeal on the 6th of May 2022, further to the inquiry that took place in May 2021 on the Sandford Park East application. That was accompanied by an approved Section 106 unilateral undertaking, which dealt with the infrastructure requirements of that development as a standalone development, as part of the greater allocation of the strategic site. But it was the biggest part of that site. But also made provision within it for the infrastructure requirements that would need to be addressed by the remainder of the strategic allocation. So, namely, Sandford Park West. At the time, there was an outstanding application, a live application for Sandalford Park West for 500 dwellings. And that was a site that covered New Warren Farm, which is owned by Donington New Homes, plus the southwesternmost part of the site called Sandfoyne. The appeal, the inspector and the Secretary of State at the time considered, as did the unilateral undertaking, the UU, that where that development to come forward, it should make a proportionate contribution towards some infrastructure matters, primarily to highway works, off-site highway works, primarily along the A339 corridor, known as Highway Works A, B, and C, which amounted to nearly 12 million. And the way the UU was structured was such that were that to be the sole site that comes forward out of the Sandalford strategic allocation and nothing else comes forward, that development still pays for all those works 100%, but were at some stage west to come forward, then their contribution would have been based on the 1,080 units that they were getting up to, and the 500 other one, it was a balance of 31.65% for west and 68.35% for east. Since then, that application, the 500 one, remains outstanding, and indeed the applicants, Donington New Homes, have indicated that they are minded to withdraw it once their current application is determined, and they have a current application in just for New Warren Farm, excluding Sandfoyne, which did not become available for when they reapplied with that. So Sandalford Park West has come forward with a 360 units application last July, and that went to committee on the 24th of April and received resolution to approve, subject to the heads of terms for Section 6 that dovetail completely into the UU in terms of infrastructure, but on a proportionate basis of 25% instead of 31.65%. So there is on a few of the infrastructure payments, there is a difference there, which is expected that will be filled in by Sandfoyne. Indeed, at committee, the developers determined that the balance of the units will come forward as part of Sandfoyne, and it is still expected that that will come forward. And as you know from the amendments that have been put forward due to the drafting error, Sandfoyne is to be included within the strategic allocation for SP16. So
just on that, before I
Yeah.
lose, there's a map that was provided today that's got a dotted, this is the southwest part.
yeah, the
There's a dotted line around
that's
that.
Sandfoyne.
That's the bit that would be added into the allocation.
Yeah, known as Sandfoyne, that bit.
So that gap that you say is that it would have to be met in the funding contributions
Right.
for the off-site works. Depend on that coming forward.
If I go back again, as I said, where Sandalford Park is to be the sole part of the site that is developed and nothing else materializes, then East will pay for what they have been accounted for in the UU. However, where any part of Sandalford Park West to come forward, that UU makes provision and requires the council, were they to grant planning permission, in effect, it includes what is the council called the ransom strip and the developers called a contribution strip, not to allow connectivity between the two sites until Sandalford Park West has paid its due, in effect. And indeed, the resolution at committee back on the 24th of April, and I think the council is minded at some stage to say whether you want us to make available their report that went to committee that addresses all these matters, in effect indicates how this will be done and the triggers that within it are how they all dovetail in effect. So that you know, within the resolution, actually, it's quite important to note that the resolution at Sandalford Park West includes, one of the heads of terms is to include another contribution strip with regard to Sandfoyne, not to enable Sandfoyne to be constructed, to be provided with construction access through West until they have a planning permission with a Section 106 that makes its own proportionate contribution. So that has been also taken care of there. Where on any of the of the smaller sort of items that otherwise may be a slight gap in funding, those matters can readily be addressed by SIL, as indeed during the inquiry, one or two items the inspector indicated that they should be dealt by SIL. So the infrastructure gap that might have, or the infrastructure requirements from the IDP, in effect, are all being spoken for. And now we have the resolution with the heads of terms, and we have made big progress with regard to hopefully signing the agreement by the end of June, we hope, at the moment, with the Donington New Homes. So we have had discussions on that. We're waiting the third version of the Section 106 to arrive to us. So it's all indicating that it has all been dealt with, in effect.
Thank you for that as a clear explanation, I think, of a complicated situation. And I think I've got the essence of it. And we'll talk about, the reason I have some interest in that is about the timing of the delivery of these sites and the contribution this will make towards meeting the district's housing needs in the forthcoming years, of course. So that's, I don't know if you want an initial observation about it. I'm going to come on to that under a later item, but that's why it is of interest.
If you wanted me to make any comments on the numbers, that's another, but if we discuss it later, I on purpose I did not make any comments on that, because at the moment we're still going for what is indicated within the policy.
Okay, thank you very much. That's helpful. Okay, before then, is there anything else anyone from the council side wish to make just to this sort of introductory stage before I come on to the sort of specific items on the agenda, which I'll go through. If not, anything from this side about that sort of background that you wish to say, but that we can't just pick up as we go through. Okay, thank you. Right. So the first specific item I had on the agenda was this reference in this part of the plan, as we discussed in the North East Thatcham allocation, the reference to the West Berkshire strategic vision. There's a proposed modification, I think, to include that. In the reason justification in a similar way to that we spoke about for policy SP 17. I suppose the question is whether there's any further points that anybody wishes to make. I mean, we know the council's explanation for why they wish to refer to that document. Any thoughts from this side? It's a no, that's fine. Okay, thank you. Anything further the council wish to say about that?
Nothing further. Okay, thank you.
So the next item on the agenda that I had was the transport issues. And I think we've probably, the significant transport issue was the delivery of the offsite highway works and the infrastructure across the site, I guess. I think you've explained what the planning permission does in terms of that. Just to take one step back though, in terms of the representations were made by the county council in response to the plan. I think we've already discussed those a couple of times, and in essence, they've gone away in terms of any outstanding concerns they have about the development as a whole, and this site in particular on the roads that they're responsible for, and you're nodding, so that's fine. Just thought I'd get that. In terms of the details of what the policy says, I think I'll just leave that until, I think I'll go through the whole policy in one go, and then just because there's been issues raised about various aspects of it that may or may not be consistent with the planning permission and the SPD or whatever else now. So I think rather than pick them off under individual topics, I'll go through the policy as a whole shortly, and we'll just sort of work out if there's anything that needs to be changed to reflect the position as we're now at. You've explained about the funding of the relationship between the planning permission and these Section 106 agreements, unilateral undertakings that are in place or being prepared. So I think that's all fine. I don't think I've got any other questions about what the IDP says and that. And obviously from as Highway Authority, you're satisfied that the arrangements are in place to deliver this and get the necessary mitigations secured. Yeah, okay, thank you. So unless there's anything specifically people want to talk about in terms of transport, other than any detailed wording that we might want to look at, I'll move on again. So, okay. Yes, of course.
Just in terms of Hampshire County Council, just so that you note that as part of the Sandford Park West application, in their consultation response, which is much later than perhaps what they have submitted for this, is they have confirmed that they're satisfied that the development as a whole and Sandford Park West would not have an effect on Hampshire road network because of the way infrastructure is proposed to be dealt with.
Thank you. That confirms, I think, what we've talked about in general terms.
And it's reported in the report as well. Okay. It's summarised there.
Thank you. So again, in terms of the next agenda item, which was about the comprehensive development and infrastructure provision of the site, I think again, obviously there's an adopted supplementary planning document in place and the plan refers to that. And I note that there are some planning conditions attached to the planning permission that also refer to the principles, the design codes to be prepared being in conformity or with those design principles. So again, I'll look at the detailed wording of the policy, but the essence is that things have moved on from the supplementary planning document, but it's still there and it's still relevant in the sense that there are things that are still referring to it. Yeah, you're nodding, so fine. Any general points about that, this general issue about the comprehensive development and infrastructure provision and the SPD before I look at detailed wording of SP 16? No? Okay. Yeah.
Just to say that obviously it's obvious to actually wonder about the issue of comprehensive development. And in the report that went again to committee on the 24th of April 2024, it deals specifically on how Sandford Park West contributes to that comprehensive development, irrespective of the fact that it's a separate application. And hopefully the report will be made available to you. As part, section 11 within that report deals with the comprehensive development, and then every section all the way to section 30, I think it is, checks on each of the topics that the report addresses, how each one deals with comprehensive development and how the two then, the permission at Sandford Park East and the proposal that came forward and has now a resolution for approval, the two provide a comprehensive development, both in terms physically and in terms of infrastructure, in accordance with the SPD. So that goes there and concludes that it will, and on each topic as well. So that's made very evident there. And I urge you to eventually have a look at that because it will help you a lot in your thinking with that.
Okay, thank you. Oh, well, it's a very kind offer. I have some reluctance given the size of that document, but I think to some respects, my interest in it actually is as much to do with North East Thatcham as it is to do with Sandford Park, in the sense of there may be lessons learned from that may be relevant to North East Thatcham.
There is a lesson there, actually, which had been raised even at the inquiry at Sandford Park East. And then in this development, we have two separate applications. There was a requirement for a single application, which has now dropped away, as you may know, as the policy is coming forward. It does not require a single application, but it requires a comprehensive development. The two developers came forward separately, but nevertheless, we think they will deliver a comprehensive development. In North East Thatcham, however, you have, as I understand it, a developers agreement, which was brought up at the inquiry, which this site did not. So that, I suppose, gives you a bit more confidence, I think, there.
Possibly so. But Yeah, I mean, it's early days in my deliberations about Northleigh Thatch, and we've discussed a lot of issues over the last couple of days, and there will be some further work and possibly further discussions as that I'll need to have about that. So I think I will ask that document to be provided, and we'll put it in the examination library, and I will have a look at it. So thank you for that. And of course, from your point of view, you'll have seen that, and no doubt, just in great detail. Right. Now, I'm aware that Bloor Homes have made some detailed comments about the wording of the policy, certain aspects of it. I think I'm going to go through rather than summarise your points, which I've noted down. I think I'll let you introduce them as we go through each aspect of it. And if there's I mean, don't deal with it now if you don't think it's now essential for whatever reason. But if there are any parts of SP16 that people feel are not sound, and they need to be changed because of where we've got to, or for whatever else reason, I think the easiest way might be to just go through it piece by piece, and you can raise it like that. Does that make sense to everyone? Yeah. Okay. Right. So if we start with it, the first obvious thing, I suppose, is the number. So the land is shown on the policies map allocate for residential development comprising approximately 1,500 dwellings. Is that still correct? Yes.
I believe it is, yes.
And that's because notwithstanding the application that's in now the applications are in for fewer than that, there is more of the site still to come forward. Is that correct?
There is still more of the site to come forward.
That's the
down point on the western side of Sandalford.
And so overall, you're still satisfied that the figure of around 1,500 is right.
And that's it. And we said the word approximately, so it's not dot on 1,500. So yeah.
Okay. No dissenting voices on that. You look slightly uncertain. Yep. Yes, please.
I think we've clarified in our reps that on Sandalford Park East, having worked through majority of projects, I think we made the point in our reps that on Sandalford Park East, having worked through the prior to commencement conditions and a long way down the track with an urban design code, and started to look at what the implications are for the site capacity, that we feel rather than 1,000 units on Sandalford Park East, we're much more likely to deliver around 800 units on Sandalford Park East.
So, yeah, okay. So from and you control the largest part of the site. So you obviously can't speak for what may take place on the other part of the site, but you're saying your contribution is less than the 1,000 originally. It's more likely to be 800.
Correct.
Yeah, okay. Anything that Donington wished to say in terms of your interest in the east, the western parts of the site?
Thanks. Yeah, just to keep this very, very simple, the application was obviously in for up to 360.
Yeah.
We'll be moving forward with reserved matters, hopefully to be submitted, I imagine, by spring next year. And it's 360 on Sandalford Park West.
Yeah, and you don't have an interest in, and you can't provide any advice about the capacity on the remaining part? No, okay. So the numbers we know about then is 1160. And so turning back to the council, any views about that and the implications for the 1,500?
We think because of we're looking at what we know with the evidence. So we've got the evidence for planning permission for 1,000 units and the resolution to grant for 360. We don't have any, I know there's work on the design code, but we as a council haven't seen any information about that. So what we're going on is what we know, basically. And until I think we get any further information, or you do, Sarah, we would be comfortable with our number, including the rest of Sandalford Park West as well.
What's the capacity on the bit of the site that isn't covered by the two permissions or applications?
We've worked it out about 120. So you've got 120, 360, 1,000, and it's just it's 1480. So yeah, approximately 1,500.
sorry, 1,000, yeah. If you assume 1,000 rather than 800, I think, yeah.
Obviously, as our Bloor Homes have indicated, in late February, they did advise that their capacity, sort of early capacity views about their site was that the number may drop from 1,000 down to about 800. And we have been working with Bloor Homes very constructively on their urban design code, etc. But that we haven't had any layouts to indicate what that capacity is. At the same time, we are discussing with Bloor Homes how we can maximize their numbers on site, obviously. At the moment, we think that there is possibility to be near that number, but we're going to have discussions going forward. So that's why the number remains. And obviously, you heard about the Sandfoin, that's the remainder of that. The one point is that the 80 extra care units, that had been approved specifically as part of the affordable housing sort of component for SP, those are going to fall away. We know that because we've got a request in for a deed of variation to remove those from the UU. And at the moment, we are looking at that. And the council has indicated that it's minded to accept that. And there's it's not an application, it's a request, obviously, at the moment for that variation. And that will drop away. And that's in accordance with what the council was looking at back at the inquiry, where it was considering that were they to be provided, either they need to be provided or they needed to fall away before the reserve matter starts, so that we can have a proper distribution of affordable housing or 40% general affordable housing throughout all the phases of the development. So,
but if those extra care units are not provided, does that, well, secondly, two things, were they counted in the assumption to deliver 1,500 units overall?
that would have given 1,580.
Okay, so they were
But it's
extra.
still approximate. You see the word approximate.
Yeah, okay, but they were, okay.
Yeah.
So losing them isn't losing anything, but does it provide more development capacity?
Well, it will then have of the numbers of units that will be provided on Sandford Park East, 40% will be all of it general affordable housing, while previously it would have been the affordable housing that would have been 40%. You take then 80, and then the remainder would have been.
Okay.
So we have more general affordable housing in effect proportionately.
Yeah. But from your point of view, your latest work on design coding, etc., the 800 takes account of the fact that those 80 extra care units wouldn't be provided.
Yeah.
Yeah. So your position still your broad view. Okay. Well, that's fine. I mean, I understand the positions. I mean, what I suppose I'd say to the council is, elsewhere, I think when you've been working out development capacity assumptions on allocations that either have permission or don't have permission or have outlined permission, and you've taken the view of developers. You've used various approaches, haven't you, using your density pattern and these sort of things. But isn't it true to say that generally, if a developer has said to you quite clearly its estimate of capacity is whatever, have you not tended to accept that? Or
I think sometimes it's when we have supporting information as well.
Right. Okay.
With that. I think, yeah.
Okay, fine. Yeah.
So the bottom line is that whilst you're being told by Bloor Homes that their latest work shows what the capacity is, the council hasn't seen any of that. The information the council has had is that this site can deliver firstly 1,080 and then 1,000. And so any amendment to the number in the policy takes the rug away from achieving the maximum possible on this site, which is what Mr. Grigoropoulos explained to you they're trying to achieve by working through this with Bloor Homes.
Okay. And that's all in the interest of making efficient use of land and meeting needs, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. Understood. Okay. Thank you. So that's the first part of Sandford Park SP16. Then we get on about a mineral resource assessment being required. Sorry.
we've made the point in our reps that there's a condition on this, and it's not a minerals resource assessment. It's for a exploration and development management plan, because to do an MRA, given the drainage and ancient woodland and everything else on this site and landscape, and mass excavate any resources there would be entirely inappropriate. And this was all agreed through the inquiry.
Yeah, okay.
So it was to change that wording from an MRA to a mineral exploration and associated development management plan should be provided for each development of the site. So if as we're working and we're doing ground leveling, we find mineral resources, we'll manage it out, but not to do a full MRA.
Understood. I think what we'll do is go through each of these bits of the policy, but rather than trying to write or agree revised wording, detailed wording here today, I think what we'll do is go through it. I'll give an indication of, I think I can give it now probably, is that I'll ask the council just to liaise with the other relevant parties and come up with ideally an agreed form of detailed wording. If there's any more significant steers I need to give, well, I'll decide in due course. But so noted that one. Thank you. Turley, do you want to just on the MRA point?
Sorry, so yes, it was actually regarding the point before. And I'm afraid
sorry,
I fear you might have missed my Toblerone, but I think I don't want to labour the point, but it would be remiss of me not to just flag the simple mathematical challenge with the allocation. I think, as you're aware, my client has other interests and emission sites that we obviously can't talk about today. But the simple fact, as you've alluded to, is that all that's on the table is up to 1,280 dwellings on this site, and there's a 220 unit shortfall. You actually made the point I was going to make, but I do want to stress it, that the council, and we'll talk about it this afternoon in other sites, saying, the developer says it will deliver a certain number. You have before your hearing statement from Berkshire saying this will deliver 800 units. There are challenges around the delivery on the site, like all of these sites. So I would encourage you just to look carefully at those numbers, because I do think there is a need for further numbers to meet that shortfall.
Yes.
And I know you've got that point, sir, so I'll move on.
No, I mean, no, that's fine. And yeah, so I'll give some thought to that. And obviously we're going to go through all of the sites and the allocations. We've also got a separate session on how all these numbers add up. So in due course, we'll come to all that. I'll have to come to a conclusion, having gone through all of those different stages. So in terms of the third bit of the policy, it's about hydraulic flood risk assessment with hydraulic modelling. Yep.
Again, we've made the point in our reps, but there's essentially 2 watersheds on the site, so at the moment it refers to a flood risk assessment, hydraulic modelling for the whole site, and we've obviously done separate ones, and there's 2 separate catchments. So we're just suggesting that is made clear that they're for the 2 main catchments, not for the whole site.
Yeah, understood. Thank you. So again, I think that's a detailed point. Maybe you can pick it up. The site will be delivered to achieve a sustainable, comprehensive development, ensure the timely and coordinated provision of infrastructure. Well, I think that's a principle that I don't think anyone would disagree with, and I think we've dealt with how that's being implemented. Then the reference to the SPD, it will be supportive proposals which have regard to and positively respond to the Sandford Park SPD, which provides a framework for the future development of the site. And I think, that's expressed in fairly general terms. I noticed the planning condition is more specific about adhering to or complying with the principles in a certain part of the SPD. But I think, well, in terms of local plan policy, I think, unless anyone's got any, sorry, do you want to?
Again, it's just a minor point, but we suggested that we insert reference to other material considerations, because we will have the design code, and that has moved on in the discussions from the SPD. The SPD is quite a dated document now. It's nearly 10 years old. So it's just to say there will be other things to look at as well. It's not just the SPD.
Yeah, understood. But those design codes, the condition requires those to be in accordance with the SPD. So is there going to be a conflict there?
there's not going to be a great conflict. We just wanted to recognise it, but inevitably things, as we know, change all the time. So you've got new drainage, new highways, new design, new environmental performance stuff that does affect what would have been in the SPD in 2015, given its baseline evidence would have been several years before that. So it was just a suggestion.
There was the point that the design code should adhere with the specific principles in a part of the SPD, but there are maybe other parts of the SPD that are more general that may not now be relevant. Is that the point?
It was just to introduce a reference to other material considerations, being the urban design code that gets approved, so that people aren't just looking at the two sort of separately.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
It is one of other material considerations, obviously, the SPD, and remains so, and carries, in effect, full weight. It is, as the SPD, the design codes will come forward because they're required by condition on both. And they will break, once they are approved, they will take precedence, those, because that we would have those design codes, which will be controlling, in effect, they will have within them master plans, which will be controlling documents. They will not be illustrative within them. But in considering it, I think the submissions are then judged against the SPD, and they don't have to fully comply on every word of it. But obviously, the SPD provides that background against which they need to be assessed. And I think the wording in the condition is general enough to enable that.
Yeah, I mean, the wording in the policy here is have regard to and positively respond to.
That's
so
right.
It's fairly general, isn't it? So yeah. Okay, thank you. Yeah.
It was just to make the point that the SPD obviously has a particular status. It went through consultation and adoption. And as a matter of law, when assessing a planning application, material considerations have to be taken into account.
The risk of diverting to North East Thatcham, just a word about the role of the SPD and the importance it has had to the council in terms of helping to negotiate through these planning application processes and secure this comprehensive approach. What was the SPD an important part of the process of that?
Very much so, yes. In our thinking anyway, indeed, if you look at the reports, they on every topic, they make reference to the relevant design principles, as they are called. They are not policies of the SPD, and how they are addressed or not.
The fact that it had SPD status, was that important, and that it was in place before the applications were?
Yes, very much so. Yes,
I'm not trying to. It's I mean, others will have views about this, and North East Thatcham, as I say, we had quite a discussion yesterday about the process that will be gone through in future to, sort out these sort of things that this SPD has helped to sort out here, and whether the council will or will not need to go through a similar sequential approach to setting some sort of framework for future applications on North East Thatcham or not. I don't want you to necessarily respond to that now, but and others will have a view, and they're not here to express it today, so they may well be listening. So, but there will be an opportunity to further discuss that, I think.
It's just so that we're fortunate enough to have an SPD on this site, so that helped with that process.
Yeah,
that's it.
Thank you for your honesty and straightforward answer. In terms of the next part, then it talks about 40% affordable housing. I guess that's still relevant. We talked about the detailed wording of the way a housing mix was expressed yesterday with reference to, it says table 4 here in a policy SP 18. I suspect should be table 3.
Yeah, it should be table 3. Yes.
But I think it was pointed out yesterday, the way that was expressed on the North East Thatcham was slightly different than the way policy SP 18 has expressed itself. So I don't know whether I don't know what's picked up here or not, but I think there may be a point about that. I think the point is this policy, insofar as it hasn't already done it, will be seeking a housing mix in accordance with policy SP 18.
Yeah, I think, following on from yesterday, I've got a note to say we should make it more in line with North East Thatcham.
So, you're one step ahead, yeah. And in terms of actually, this goes on to say, doesn't it? And therefore, an emphasis on homes with at least 3 bedrooms. I mean, that presumably reflects Table 3 in Policy SP18 in terms of the.
It does, and it's following on through the core strategy. The core strategy itself required sort of an emphasis on family housing. So I suppose we were trying to get a figure on it that reflects the mix.
Yeah. Okay. And in the sense that this particular site is, from the council point of view, is particularly suitable for those sort of homes.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay.
And sir, the mix has already been determined both for market housing and for affordable housing in SPE, and the same mix has come forward to SP West.
Forward in the application that's put forward.
In the application that's put forward,
Yeah, okay.
and in the resolution in terms of both conditions and in the section 106 heads of terms. Yeah.
Well, I don't think there's been any. Oh, yeah. Okay. Any points on the reference to SP18 and housing mix?
Sorry, sir, just a minor point. Having flagged this, and with the passage of time, as Nico says, it's tied up in the 106, but I do wonder whether it's worth just deleting the text after SP18 in this policy, because actually the table doesn't actually necessarily suggest an emphasis on 3 bedrooms. Because actually there's more sort of percentages in the 2 beds. That table doesn't tie in with the Sandalford specific circumstances.
Indeed. I mean, family housing is considered to be 2-bed houses upwards. 2-bed flats and 1-bed flats, I think, are not necessarily family houses. And so the approval we have, the approvals we have, including the resolution, indicate that there is a preponderance or an emphasis on family housing.
So a phrase that if it was needing to have a reference here, it would be to family housing rather than, or family homes rather than 3 bedrooms.
And that brings forward the wording in the core strategy.
Okay. Thank you.
Just to say, and that's for the market housing, the affordable housing component is a bit less, it's got more smaller units, but it is because that's what the needs were for. So,
okay.
Yeah.
The next thing is about the broad location of the development being limited to the north and west of the site, landscape sensitivity. I mean, I don't suppose anyone takes issue with that because that's what's happened. So, I mean, I think we can probably move on. And that's also manifests where the settlement boundary is drawn through the allocation, doesn't it? So, again, lessons for North East Thatcham or not, I'm not sure. On-site renewable and a carbon neutral development. Any points you wish to say about that?
Yes, this is perhaps the element of the policy we have biggest issue with, and for a number of reasons which we set out in our reps.
Yeah.
And this is the one area we suggest is essentially deleted and replaced with a requirement to deliver a sustainability and energy strategy, which ties in with the condition on our permission. Set out some of the reasons why, but you could read this to suggest that you've got to assist in the delivery of carbon neutral development, implying you've got to have a carbon neutral development, which is not a requirement anywhere and goes well beyond building regulations. There's also no agreed definition of what a carbon neutral development is. And there's this area is a rapidly evolving area and has been involved in this for about 15, 20 years, and was at a conference in Leeds this week on this, looking at microgrids and things and alternative ways of actually reducing the carbon emissions of the houses. So I think this bullet point, it could imply you want large scale renewables, which I don't think anyone does. But B, it infers it's going to be a carbon neutral development, which is not a requirement of the planning permission or policy elsewhere, and is a vague term. So we have suggested some more alternative wording in our reps for this, but this is the point of the policy we feel strongest about.
Yeah, so we've got a separate session, which I suspect may be a fairly long and detailed one about the policies in here about the. I mean, I can't, they deal with carbon neutral, they deal with particularly energy standards, et cetera, et cetera. So I don't know if you're coming to that or not, but it sounds from your interest, it would be a good idea if you did. So we'll deal with that in the general. I think here, in effect, this is in effect attempting to summarise something for this site that is reflected by the policies in the plan. I think maybe rather than come to any decisions about that now, and I mean, well, any initial observations about this requirement for carbon neutral development? You've heard what has been said, and we'll come back to it when we talk about the detailed policy, but any initial observations?
Yes, sir. You will realise that when the council at the inquiry had to put forward suggested conditions, including the condition for zero carbon renewables, whatever it was called, that condition, which was accepted, the wording of that condition by the inspector, were you to look at the inspector's report to the Secretary of State, and obviously the Secretary of State's decision letter. Within that, we were required to provide a reason, which the inspector then does not put a reason to the condition. And the reason was clear: in order to deliver a carbon neutral development. There was the policy CS15 of course, strategy that required zero carbon, it was called, post 2016. And the inspector accepted the requirement of that policy. And indeed, the provision of renewables on site is in order to assist in the delivery of a carbon neutral development, carbon neutrality, and where the whole issue was philosophically even that the council had since set a target for 2030 carbon neutrality for West Berkshire, and its strategic sites have to deliver that. If they don't, nothing is going to deliver it. The council also accepts the fabric first approach to obviously that, and then it's about the regulated and unregulated energy requirements of the site to be delivered through a mix of renewables, low carbon and zero carbon energy generation on site in order to deliver that. So that squares more the circle. So the reason to the condition is missing there. Within the inspector's report, the thinking is there, is provided, the rationale in effect. And should you wish to have the reason, obviously, in the report, obviously that was the resolution for, and it's going to be on the decision notice for Sandford Park West, that reason is there. So that is provided there.
The condition, as was suggested by the council, was considered by the inspector as is normal, and it was not amended by the inspector.
It was not an amendment, so it would be that so for its phase, on every reserve matter, for its phase on every reserve matters application, this will be accompanied by a fully detailed scheme of on-site energy generation for renewable, low carbon and/or zero carbon energy sources. And the reason for that is in order to assist in the delivery of a carbon neutral development, within which we would accept the fabric first approach, and then it will be on the on the remainder of the requirements, energy requirements for regulated and unregulated energy for the development.
So the wording that you put forward was agreed by the inspector, and it was agreed by the Secretary of State, and issuing the permission. Okay, and it includes, so the element of on-site renewable, it's not necessarily an objection to that. It's the way it's expressed and the way it could be interpreted. But the more fundamental point is the carbon neutral reference, is it?
Yes, we will have renewable energy generation without doubt. That's not the issue.
Yeah.
But the condition, as Mr. Scropper just read out, makes no reference to carbon neutral at all.
No, I think the point he's making, the reason for the condition,
but it doesn't say you shall do a scheme to achieve carbon neutral development.
Yeah, okay.
That's just words on the page. So I don't think whatever the discussion was, the inspector decided that's the appropriate wording, and we're seeking to change the policy to be in line with that wording.
Yeah, understood. So it's the issue with this policy. Well, one, it's not the principle of on-site renewable. If you accept that, it's the way it's expressed could be misinterpreted, but it's the link with carbon neutrality that yeah, understood. Right. I think we'll leave it there for today. Sorry, go on.
We could just say that we've suggested a criteria for North East Satcham, which we could adopt for Sandal.
Sorry, I can't hear.
Sorry, we've suggested a similar approach for North East Satcham. So the wording for that could be put across to Sandalford, which basically says development proposals will be supported by a sustainability statement and an energy statement, which sets out measures to achieve a model low carbon development in accordance with DM4 SP5, net zero carbon, regulated and unregulated energy emissions, BREEAM excellent on non-residential buildings. Sorry. Net zero carbon emissions for dwellings, BREEAM for non-residential, on-site renewable energy to assist in the delivery of a net zero carbon neutral development and carbon offsetting. But we can carry on liaising, I suppose.
Yeah. So it's like a lot of these policies that are site specific. In effect, you're just flagging up something that's dealt with in detail by other policies in the plan, strategic and development management. So in this case, SP7, I think it is, and DM4, which are about energy efficiency, zero carbon, carbon neutrality, all those sort of things. So, yeah, and we've got, as I said, we've got that to discuss in detail, those policies in due course. So I think leave this one, and again, it's one where detailed wording maybe could be looked at and how far you need to summarise what those other policies are requiring, or you just cross-refer to them. It might be the issue. Reference to 4 primary access points. Again, that's been achieved, has it? Oh, that will be achieved, yeah.
It has been achieved.
Yeah.
Yes. Indeed, as part of the Sandalford Park West application, the corridor along Warren Road has been, the details for it have been submitted in full detail. So it's not a reserved matter. So for that bit of that access of that site. So Warren Road is at the moment has got a resolution to be delivered in detail, along with land assembly of frontage properties to deliver the required width, etc.
Okay. In terms of access onto the A399, I think was that the one that A339? Sorry, was that the issue that you wanted to clarify?
Yes, and it was only a clarification to say that should be via Highwood Copse Way, which is the agreed link, rather than leaving it vague. We now have that specific.
Yeah, that is the name now of that road. The A339 access link, as it is referred to in the unilateral undertaking, is now called the Highwood Copse Way. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Right. Okay. And we've got various other elements of the transport infrastructure which is set out in bullet point form. But again, are they still relevant, even though they may actually now be secured? No quibbles with those by the looks of things. No. Then we've got the green infrastructure aspects of the policy. I don't think anybody raised any queries about those. I think that's it, isn't it? Yeah, sorry, the other one I'd got provision for retail facilities in the form of a local centre and business employment. That's again something that's been secured.
Yeah, by conditions now. It was part of the unilateral undertaking, but it was references to the local centre were crossed out by the Secretary of State's blue pencil sort of provision, if you want, whatever it's called. And And so it's dealt by condition in the approval for provision of the local centre by the occupation of 700 dwellings at SPE. Yeah.
Okay, Bloorhomes.
Along with other conditions that refer to each element of commercial development within it, etc.
Just again, a couple of minor points in terms of the extension, the school's bullet point. We've suggested amending the second part of that to include funding and/or land for the extension of Park House School, just to give some flexibility on that delivery. And in terms of the local centre, we've just suggested some wording to clarify what is actually coming forward in our discussions, which to include community facilities, local shops and employment opportunities, which is more reflective of what's coming through. There is community facilities there. There will be employment opportunities, but we're not talking about significant employment use. So we put those wordings through, hopefully can agree on minor amendments.
Okay, well, yes, okay. Just go back to the issue, provision of a new primary school on site. That's yeah. It's the way you express the extension of Park House School.
Just to clarify, for Park House School, there are two elements. There's expansion of its facilities within the existing demise of the school. In a study that allows 4 packages of expansion of its facilities, both buildings and other facilities on the site, as well as there's the expansion land of the school, which is land within SPE that provides then additional facilities on there, which is actually a playing pitch and social space. So there's both land and contribution towards those 4 packages, which towards the 4 packages contribution is made by both developers. For the land itself, obviously, SPE is providing that land as part of the approval. And for the primary school, as you said, they're providing the land and funding. The and/or is a bit or potentially an issue if you were to stick with or and then you miss out the other. So in effect, the and is a matter that most probably defines it all rather than the or, I would have thought.
Okay, thank you.
Just to be clear, we're providing, and we already have approval for the primary school site, and we have the funding mechanism in there. But we are in discussions about the extension land and whether there's an alternative to that, which would involve funding to the school rather than the land. So that's why we've put that in, and the council's aware of that.
Yeah, okay, but the way it's expressed at the moment, the extension of Park House School is suitably flexible, is it not? To cover both an expansion of the land and/or extension to existing buildings?
If it were to be interpreted that way, then yes.
So what was your alternative wording?
But it was funding and/or land for.
So the provision would be funding and/or land for.
Yeah.
Okay, well, again, I think can we leave it for today?
It's just that the current wording allows, as you said, enough flexibility for both and for those discussions that have been had. I would have thought.
I would.
We're concerned that the and/or might actually be less flexible.
In what he's just suggested. Yeah, I understood. Okay. Right. Okay. Writing a detailed wording by committees. It's never easy, is it? But I think it's helpful to have gone through it. And I think the outcome of all that is I think there is some tweaking to the wording that's probably necessary to make this up to date and sound.
We are having very constructive discussions.
Good. Okay. Well, I think I can rely on you to work to liaise constructively together to come up with some agreed wording, make my life easier, which is always a good thing. So unless there's anything else on detailed wording there, can we move on and look at the issue about, which we've already touched on, I think, really, in terms of numbers, but also timing, which may be of some interest to town and provision about what this site will actually deliver and when it will be. And obviously then all how that factors into the overall deliberations about housing and supply and 5-year supply and supply for the planned period, etc. So we've talked about the absolute numbers. I don't think there's much more. And well, absolutely, unless, town or provision, you didn't say anything at the time in terms of around 1,500 from what you've heard. Is there anything you wish to say? I suspect I know what it probably is, but.
Yes, there appears to be a gap of a couple of hundred units in the numbers. So
you think 1,500 is on the high side based on what
yes, I mean, we should take notice of what Bloor Homes are saying. That it is rare that a housing developer will commit to reducing numbers unless they're pretty certain that they can't.
Well, I was going to say that's probably the first time I've heard it, to be honest with you. So,
but in actual fact, if you look at major strategic allocations, it is rare that they deliver right up to the number of units. It is very common that there's a headroom of perhaps up to 10%. I think we should listen to our colleague from Bloor Homes and take account of that accordingly.
Provision, anything you wish to add?
Yeah, no, we'd agree with that. I think we sort of suggest a figure of about 1,280.
Which I think is the maths of what we've heard. If you take 800 and whatever the other ones were.
Yes. Yeah.
Rather than 1,480.
Yeah.
But we are in discussions on how to maximize numbers, though. So,
I mean, in some ways, it doesn't matter for an individual site because it's an estimate of capacity. It matters to me only in the sense that I do have to form a view about how all these things add up. So that's why. To be, on one level, it's fine. Leave it at 1,500. If you can get 1,500, it's a good thing. So, and that may be where I end up concluding is there's no harm in leaving it there. But when I add all these things up, I may form a view. Well, they're on the high side in terms of optimism, or they're not, or whatever. So, in terms of timing, then, another thing that it's difficult, isn't it, to make trajectories? Sometimes, and quite often, they do appear to be more optimistic than when they work out in practice. But in terms of I suppose the bottom line is, will this site be completed during the planned period, which now, I'm losing track of things now, it's 2041, I think, isn't it? When it was submitted, it was 2039. And at the time when you prepared the plan, you assumed it would be completed by 2039. You may still say that's the case. And even if it isn't, 2041 is the end date now that we're looking at in terms of adding up these numbers.
From the progress we have made on the discussions, it appears so, sir, that it's well within the timescale of the plan. What we understand by the developers and the projections.
So let me just look at the individual parts then. Well, maybe it's easiest just to go to you both and talk about when you expect to start and the delivery rates. So do you want to go first, Bloor Homes? Yeah.
Thank you. On a more positive note from the numbers, the capacity, we've done a tremendous amount of work over the last couple of years on all the prior to commencement conditions and got a agreed position on all of those. And I think we're just about there with our technical approvals for Section 278 site access, on-site drainage. We have the urban design code ready to submit. That's been through a lot of workshops. We've worked through all the ancient woodland issues. So we now know the site very well. We've worked through the alley crossing engineering options, and we're very confident that we'll be submitting the last of the prior to commencement discharge applications before the summer holidays, and looking to have the first infrastructure reserve matter submitted after the summer holidays and our first residential phase reserve matter by the end of the year. And hence, we're very confident that what is in the trajectory that we will be delivering 50 dwellings by 31st of March 2027. We may deliver more. Thereafter, I think there's 100 units an annum in the trajectory. It's quite possible if the market returns, which it's looking to do, that may be higher, maybe 120 units an annum, because we might be running a 2-outlet development here. So in terms of will we deliver whatever the number is within the plan period, yes, we are very confident we will. And having done all that work, I'm confident to sit here and say that today.
Yeah, so first completions in the year end, the 2026-27 year.
Yes.
Yeah.
And there'll be, whether there's a couple in the first year or whether we'll have 50 by March 2027.
Okay, and then thereafter, your estimate was 100 per year, but it could be more.
It's 100 per year.
Yeah.
We're confident that it could be, if the market is good, it will be 120 a year.
Okay, fine, thank you. And in terms of Donington, do you want to talk through your process? Because obviously you've got planning application in, but then there's more steps to go through before you get started on site, obviously.
Yeah, so thank you. So we discussed this at committee as well in terms of trajectory as well. So working very closely with Mr. Gouropoulos on this, getting the Section 106 by the end of June, decision notice. And so therefore we can continue with work on discharging conditions, getting reserved matters. The Warren Road application, or the Warren Road element is detailed, so we will want to get that started sooner rather than later. So looking forward, subject to doing discharging conditions and doing various pre-apps and public exhibitions during the course of the later part of this year, would like to think that our first reserve matter permission will be spring, summer of next year. Obviously majoring on Warren Road. So therefore, if you look at projection wise, sir, so 2026, 2027, 30 units. Then after that, we're looking at 60 units a year to take us through to the end of the build.
Year after?
60 units per year, and that will take us to 2032.
So your estimated first delivery of homes is the same as Bloor Homes, notwithstanding the fact that you are some way behind them in terms of...
Absolutely, we're one developer ourselves, so we don't have to go to the marketplace or anything like that. So we can get on with the job.
Okay, thank you. I'll come on to... In terms of the trajectory that I've got from the council in the latest, I forgot what the number is. We talked about it yesterday, didn't we? The grid. Are those the same figures as that you've been using?
No, so I think well, a slight difference.
Right.
That at the point of Sandalford Park, Sandalford Park East is correct. Yeah, same. We have the same. Sandalford Park West, it was just based on the information we were given before Christmas, I think it was, so prior to the resolution to grant planning permission. But again, we're not so far off. There were 50 units in year 28, 29 and would finish by 37, 38.
So that's forward now.
So yeah, we're projected to be ahead. We probably would update the trajectory as well once planning permission's been granted, I believe.
Okay, so in both cases, you're confident that those two developments could be completed and built out by 2041, with some room to spare on that in terms of delivery rates. And in terms of the remaining bit, what's any estimate of timing for that coming forward?
I suppose that was part of because that was 500 on the Sandalford Park West, and that element still hasn't got permission. I think we'd have to pull it out, so we'd have to have another column, I suppose, in another trajectory, but ultimately still within the plan period.
So what's the position with the landowner, the promoter, etc., with that bit now?
No.
Or is that?
I think still.
Is it confidential? Maybe I don't know.
All I can say at this, we are talking to the landowners at some point at this stage.
It's privately owned. It's not, there's no interest in it by a land promoter or a house builder.
That's correct, sir.
Yeah, okay.
Physically, sir, to develop that site, you need construction access through New Warren Farm, which is Sandalford Park West as approved.
So it would follow on as a later phase anyway.
That's right. But you need to come through that site to gain access, because otherwise it's landlocked. It doesn't have access at the moment to construct it otherwise. And you will recall, sir, that I referred to this provision in the section 106. We're negotiating at the moment where that will be provided access only once they have permission, and section 106 that makes proportionate contribution to infrastructure.
I've forgotten what the numbers on that you said, but it would be developed.
That would, at the moment, based on 35 units per hectare, works out about 120 units.
So it'd be a couple of years, 2 or 3 years development.
Yeah, yeah, that's right. It would be within that time scale again, definitely, because obviously Sandalford Park West at the moment they indicate are committed to finish their development by about 2032, I think they mentioned.
Yeah.
So whether even to be at the end of that, that's another 2 or 3 years. Yeah.
Okay. So you're pretty confident it'd be built out. The whole thing could be built out, subject to the landowner disposing of it, or whatever. But yeah. Okay, understood. So are there any contrary views?
It's, I, with all due respect to my colleagues on my right, I think there's a fair amount of optimism bias in some of those judgments around timing. 50 units in the period, which was 26, 27, would suggest that you would have the site opened up and constructing those units at the beginning of 25, 26, which is 3 short months after the Reserve Matters application is due to be submitted. You may, with fair wind and plain sailing, you may see some completions during that year, but I would be highly sceptical that 50 units can be delivered within that timescale. I can point to general studies regarding build-out rates, and I did in our matter statement, Savills and the Land Promoters Foundation of conclusion of around 0.6 units per outlet per week, which if you run all that through probably means build-out overall is around about 2041, 2042, depending on when you complete, when you get those sites opened up. But really our points are there's a hole in the numbers in the early part of the plan period.
Okay. Yes, I remember reading you expressed that you use a different currency than is normally used in terms of talking about build-out rates, which is usually expressed in terms of units per year, I suppose, in my experience. So yeah, just explain what that was some work that Savills had done, was it? For
yes, so Savills had looked historically. I mean, and obviously Savills sell a lot of land, don't they? And they'd looked historically and at build-out rates since the 2008 crash, and they looked at the impact of the cessation of Help to Buy and all of that, and their projection was even with additional financial support, a prudent estimate of 0.6 market sales per outlet per week would be a safe one for the foreseeable future.
So what's that per year? 1.4 per week is
well 0.6 per outlet times 52.
I'm just trying to convert it to a currency that I can compare with other.
31 per annum per outlet.
Right, which, I mean, again, we can look at various bits of research on this, including this Lichfield start to finish, which is on large sites, on outlets. It has figures, doesn't it, in there? I can't remember now. That doesn't sound that dissimilar to what.
Yeah, I think a rough rule of thumb was always 0.8 per week.
Right.
per outlet per week, but
Okay.
evidence has shown that that has come down in recent years.
Does that include affordable housing though?
No, that's market.
So, and this site with 40% affordable, well, that would make a significant difference, wouldn't it?
Yeah, but I only calculated on the basis of the market
Yeah.
element. So
When we're talking about these absolute numbers, that's only 60% of,
yes, correct.
so
yeah.
you'd have another 20 per year on top of that from,
You would.
yeah. Okay.
So just to bear in mind that this is not a single site, obviously, you know, we would have development at east, most probably on two sites at the same time, running in parallel, one at west and potentially one at some point, a fourth site all happening at the same time. So, so it's not one site that then pushes out all those numbers. So that's one to say, and it's also completions rather than obviously the sales. That's another matter, but obviously the sales do affect completions.
Yeah.
And just to say, our Newbury Racecourse development, it was a core strategic site. The average build out, and that was 1,500 dwellings as well, up to 1,500 dwellings. The average build out was worked out to be 110 dwellings per year. Just wanted to raise that. 110 dwellings per year.
And how many outlets was that then too?
That was one.
One outlet, 110 per year?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Okay, thank you. Town, do you want to come
Sorry,
back?
can I just come back on that? Newbury Racecourse was largely apartments, and they deliver a much lumpier because you can't sell them. You need to sell them floor by floor at least. And just on the number of outlets, I also quoted in our Matter 3 statement evidence around competition within close proximity. It would naturally restrict the number of outlets. You wouldn't expect to see more than 3, I think, as an absolute maximum delivering on the size of this site.
Provision.
Thank you, sir. Again, I just refer you to the Litchfield's evidence in start to finish version 3, figure 3.2. So that refers to basically in yellow and green, it gives you the average time to obtain detailed consent and then your delivery period up to your first completions. So if we're taking 800 to 1,000 units, we're looking at sort of 3 to 3.5 years from obviously, well, that's from obviously outline, but obviously where we're at now. So if you start at your reserve matters submission for the eastern parcel at the end of this year, then you're not going to be delivering your first completions within 26, 27. You're more likely to be 27, 28, 28, 29. And they're similar then for the western parcel. That's actually smaller sites tend to take longer, and that's sorry, my computer's just trying to shut down. That's 4.5. That's 4.5 years from reserve matters to the first completions. So again, that would be a further delay of a year. Obviously, to the council's figures, and a significant delay to what Donaldson Homes are suggesting.
Yes, okay, thank you. Bloor Homes.
Well, I don't know if we're doing something better than Litchfields, but we're actually building houses. And as I said, I think we just got the I's and the T's to dot on our 278 for our site access. We will have our infrastructure application in, which is the primary street network. In autumn, we will be on site in 2025, putting the infrastructure in. And our current experience is for a single site outlet, we're completing 60 units an annum. We have at the moment in Basingstoke, a 2-site outlet, which is delivering 120 units per annum. So where we say we will have 50 units by March 2027, we may have more. Where we say we'll deliver 100 units per annum, we may well deliver more. But I think you can have complete confidence we'll have our Soundford Park East site developed out within the plan period.
And we have PPAs on both sides as well.
Yeah, okay.
planning performance agreement.
I mean, the only thing that I've taken, well, not the only thing, one of the things I took from this, from what Matthew Spry said yesterday about start to finish, which obviously he's been actively involved in that, I understand, or certainly Lichfields, is that the danger of using averages, in the sense that there may be certain instances where, well, the data shows that there's great variation in the time frames for these things. So in particular circumstances, and I think what Law Holmes is saying, this is a case in point, they could be considerably shorter periods than some of those averages would suggest. So anyway, we'll leave that. Just to remind me, I mean, we're going to come look back and look at numbers, but in terms of there is some contribution assumed from these sites or this site to the 5-year supply that the council has. So I mean, the reason I'm asking, I'll deal with it when we come to it. Is that
I believe so. I think for Sandal Park East, yeah, because it's got permission.
A year or two or
Yeah,
something.
yeah, it's about a year.
But it's not a huge contribution. It's
about 50 units, I think.
50 units.
Yeah, okay. So I'll deal with that at the time. But the basic point, I suppose, is will this site be completed during the plan period and contribute however many up to 2041? And I think, you know, we've heard information about that today, so that was helpful. Right, good. I don't think I've got anything about viability in the sense that I think whatever high-level viability assessments may have done or said, things have moved on and we've got schemes being progressed, and clearly the viability is not.
There has not been a viability issue, sir.
No, and the policy requirements that are set out, including the 40% affordable, etc., and the infrastructure is all subject to a bit of SIL possibly for some things. It's all agreed and sorted out. So, yeah. Okay, so that's fine. In terms of the settlement boundary, I think the plan that you've tabled to, oh no, that's not the settlement boundary, is it? The note that you've tabled today, this includes two things, doesn't it? One is about the red line boundary, and I think you've mapped that out there. I think you've also suggested, I didn't really have time to think through it in any detail, but the settlement boundary in the submitted plan was reflected the developable area in essence of the site. You proposed a modification or two modifications to that. But I think you're saying they now need to be changed again.
Yeah, apologies.
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah, it was just an error. And actually it's only the settlement boundary south of one of the Crooks Cop, sorry. We had a main modification to put it into the settlement boundary, and actually it should remain out. And so the main modification would cancel itself out.
I think just in practical terms, I think the easiest way to present what the position is on the plan that you've shown the changes to the red line allocation that you've tabled today. If you could just put the settlement boundary on there.
Yes, yeah.
As you want it to be.
That's fine.
That would be easiest.
Okay, yeah.
Okay. The other thing I noticed with one of the residential non-strategic allocations we're talking about today, RSA 1, I think it is, Northern Newbury College. Is that affected by this change to this allocation in any way? We can deal with it this afternoon, but
I think, yeah, it would be good discussion for this afternoon. I think the allocation, I can't recall the number of dwellings.
Yeah, I guess it was 15.
15, yeah.
It's only a small
one. For north of the college, RSA 1.
Yeah.
Yeah, it doesn't impact on that section of the site, the actual change of the site boundary for Sandalford. But I do understand that the promoters want to increase the site allocation, but I think that might be for this afternoon.
Okay, let's pick it up this afternoon. Okay. Anything about the settlement boundary, sorry?
No, all it was is the remainder of the site is within the settlement boundary in effect. So what those developers were seeking to include within the allocation. So you got the allocated site outside of the settlement boundary, and they're seeking to add a bit within, which you will discuss, I think, this afternoon.
In terms of, I think there was a point by Donington about an area. Is that still an outstanding?
So yes, I think this plan's probably moved things on because the Brick Hill Copse has been in and out of the settlement boundary and the allocation for various versions. Just looking at this and speaking to my client, I think we're content with this, and I actually think it's quite sensible to bring Warren Road into the boundary as well, because that's been a matter discussed a lot locally. So we're
So,
concerned.
okay, so these changes shown on the map.
We're
correct,
happy
they
it's
deals with
go
that.
back to where we hoped it would go. So I think we're okay.
I just wanted to clarify though, that along Warren Road, we've just shown only the extent at the moment of Warren Road and its corridor rather than including the land assembly of properties that needed to make the width, to make up the width of
Yeah.
the new Warren Road.
Yeah.
So that has not been included in that red line shown now.
No, okay.
But
But that's a detail that we
yeah,
sorted out.
that's it. And it is going to have, it's going to have approval, obviously.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Fine. So these changes that you're showing to these maps are changes that would follow through onto the policies map. Yeah. Okay, is there anything else? Yeah, Bloor Holmes.
Just a couple of points. First one's quite minor in that in the version of the plan that was put out for consultation, which was a bit fuzzy. We think there's a few little areas where they don't quite tie up. They're not key, but if we can just share a plan and just say that doesn't really quite tie up. What was more concerning is this update this morning, wanting to take out the amendment to the boundary to include land south of Crooks Copse, to keep that outside of the settlement boundary. As that was previously, that doesn't correlate with the approved parameter plan, the land use and access parameter plan, and you'd have small but important areas of what's been approved would be outside of the settlement boundary, including the crossing. But they're significant enough areas for us not to be happy with that proposed amendment. I'm not really sure what benefit that brings, given we have approved parameter plans, and why you'd want to draw your settlement boundary that weren't in accordance with that approval.
So as submitted, the settlement boundary you're saying doesn't reflect these parameter plans? The plan.
It was where, I think I'm right in saying, correct me if you're wrong, previously the settlement boundary was going to go across between Highwood and Slockett's Copse.
That was a modification that they proposed.
And now this morning you were saying you want to go back on that. Yeah, and that's not what we were happy with where it was before. We're not happy with it going back to where it was before, because that leaves developed areas that have approval outside of the settlement boundary, which doesn't really seem to make sense.
So the copse itself, that wouldn't be developed.
No.
But by drawing the boundary down where it was originally, it excludes what you're saying, some of that land that's below the actual copse.
Yeah,
is actually going to be affected by
areas below the copse that come in.
And you can't draw the line to exclude the copse, really.
If you drew it around what we have approval for, we're not going to have an issue with it. No. But as it was previously, you've drawn straight lines where actually development extends beyond them in the approved parameter plan.
So just to clarify, there is a 0.35 of a hectare of area to the east of this side that has got approval, and the council would be content to include that within the settlement boundary as approved on the Bloor's approval. But this was an error in effect, because we cannot include this area and then include Crooks Copse within it. As to the roads, the crossing that valley, it can take place, and obviously it's got permission outside of the settlement boundary. But we would be happy to adjust this, obviously, to ensure that the settlement boundary reflects exactly the approval that Bloor Homes have already.
Yeah, but you don't want to draw it down where you originally modified it.
No, that was a mistake, actually, that it was drawn.
That implies that the copse wood is in the settlement boundary.
As well as this part of the North Valley that could then end up being developed within the settlement, which we shouldn't be.
No, okay, understood. I think I'll leave that detail, can I, to...
Yeah, we'd be happy with that. I'd say it's on both sides, though. It's not just one side. You've got to come in on both sides and get the right line up the top, but we'll be happy with that.
If you provide us with that, actually, then we can agree that exact, yeah.
Right. Anything else on the maps or indeed anything else on this policy? No, okay. Right, so we'll finish there for this morning. Thank you, that was helpful. I mean, it's all detailed stuff, but I think there's a few bits and pieces to tidy up, but it was helpful to talk through, in particular, the the delivery arrangements and timings, so we can I'll feed into my considerations. Right, okay, so we finished early. Some of us are back this afternoon at 2 o'clock. So I will see you then. Thank you.